and,
So you have a new camcorder, Stephanie.
Yep. And I don't know how to use it exactly. I don't think I'm going to be able to learn all this by today. I wanted to shoot my son's birthday party.
Don't be intimidated by all those details. I'll show you 7 easy steps to creating good home videos. It's simply a combination of understanding your equipment, good camera techniques, using the appropriate accessories, and learning how to compose a picture. Here is your basic checklist of the 7 steps. You should consult this every time you begin taping. Since the battery is the source of power for your equipment, always make sure it has been fully charged at the start of taping. This way you won't run out of power in the middle of a recording. Secondly, push the power button to make sure you have power and that everything is working properly. For the very best results, you should always use new high-quality tape. Camera setup is next. This means deciding the speed you want to shoot at. The faster the tape speed, the better the quality. On some camcorders, the setting is automatic and you have no choice. The 5th step is choosing the proper filter. Filters are usually marked for indoors or outdoors. The right one is essential to get true colors. Exposure, which means setting the lens on automatic or manual control, is next. Here again, some cameras have only automatic. If you have an option, you should set the control to automatic under normal lighting conditions. Focusing the camcorder properly is the final step on our checklist, Stephanie. Unless this function also is automatic on your camera, zoom in the lens to the focal point of the scene you are shooting and focus it clearly in that position. From then on, you will be in focus, even when you zoom out. One more thing. It is important to be aware of your camera's audio system. Most have automatic systems which are activated whenever your camera is on. Remember that the sounds closest to the microphone will be louder than those farther away. You got all that?
I think so.
Okay, battery fully charged. Power up. Fresh tape.
Yep.
Determine camera speed. Correct filter. Automatic or manual exposure. Zoom in on subject to set focus. Now let's put it to work. Weren't you about to go shopping for a birthday present before you got lost in your manual?
Sure was. I think I'm going to go get a puppy for my son's birthday at the Humane Society. Maybe they'd let me use the camcorder there. I should call. Hi. I'm calling in regards to the possibility of using a camcorder there. I'm coming in to pick up a birthday present for my son, and I'd like to know if that's a problem at all with you. Great. Okay. Okay, I should see you shortly. Thanks much. Bye-bye. Looks like a go. Let's go.
Okay, Stephanie. Checklist completed? This is a pretty busy place to throw you into on your first assignment, but don't panic. Just get used to the feel of the camera and do some random shooting. Well, it's certainly going to be difficult choosing between all of these cute little critters. Say, here's a little brood a mother would be proud of. Stephanie, remember to always take the camera out of record when you're not recording. Oh, it looks like Stephanie has made her decision on the birthday present. Someone is going to be surprised and happy. Stephanie, I think now you understand the basics of getting your camcorder up and running. It looked like you were having fun taping those puppies.
I sure was. They were so cute, weren't they? I'm glad I've got them on tape now.
They really were. Our next step is to learn what separates really good video from mediocre, namely camera technique and a little planning.
Right. Good camera technique. What is that?
What is that? What is good camera technique? You know, one of the interesting things about that that information, that informative video that we were watching, that I thought that stuck out a little bit, was the fact that she called up in advance to ask the SPCA if it was okay if she brought her camera with her and recorded. Something that is completely foreign. You know, now that everyone has a camera in their pocket, it's just assumed, consent is just assumed, like, oh no, I can record anything and everything around me all the time. But that wasn't the case not so long ago. People were very uncomfortable being recorded and would be very upset if you recorded them without their permission. But now it's just assumed that you're on the record all the time. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this planet. It's fairly early for me, but not super early like it has been in the past. I slept somewhat normally. Still kind of getting over my cold, so I might cough a little bit, which is also why I kind of slept in, if you can call this sleeping in. I've been out like a light when I do finally go to bed. And as I've said, if this is the vid, you guys got nothing to worry about. Just a normal-ass cold. Or it might not be, it might be a normal-ass cold. I have no idea. Which, by the way, the normal-ass cold is a coronavirus. A lot of people do not know this. Which is funny because one of the reasons why we don't have a vaccine for the normal-ass cold is it is a coronavirus and it mutates all the time. And so one of the things that people were worried about in terms of the vid was, it's going to mutate and, that'll make... they were talking about this like a year ago or almost a year ago, right? One of the things that'll make vaccines almost impossible to make is it'll mutate so much. With the flu, we only have a vaccine that from the last year's flu, and so that's why flu vaccines don't work very well, because the flu mutates, and by the time you might get it, it'll be a totally different. Well, surprise, surprise. That's what they're saying happened already. So even though the vaccine that they'll still make you get was just released a couple days ago. Oh, now it's mutated again. It's mutated again, and now we've got phase 3 or whatever it is, right? Like the whatever's going on in Europe, where they're saying, oh, we got to close all the borders down. France has shut down the border, and UK has all kinds of crazy restrictions where Christmas is canceled, and because it's mutated. It's mutated. It doesn't matter that we have the vaccine. It's mutated. This is going to go on forever, guys. I mean, maybe not forever until they think of more, because eventually people will be like, all right, dude, we've been locked down for like 5 years. They will have to be a little more creative. But they're going to get what they want. They're going to get what they want first. And then they can start rewarding you with freedom passes. But they want the full, especially right now, because right now civil unrest is in the air. Civil unrest is in the air all across the West. It's not just in America where it's particularly kind of sparky. The ruling class, I think, is feeling an existential threat right now, and so they're acting accordingly. So, speaking of which, yesterday I kind of talked about how we would see Trump kind of doing a last-ditch effort on the 6th. The chances of it actually going his way were slim, simply because, according to people in the House and the Senate, because what's required, briefly, what happened on the 6th is that's when they count the Electoral College votes. Well, Mike Pence does. And during the count, the possibility is, or the legal possibility is, Mike Pence can say, oh, I've got, for Pennsylvania, I've got 2 sets of votes. I've got one set of votes that were certified by the governor and whatever for Biden, but I also have these alternate votes for Trump. And, do we have anyone who wants to debate this? And if someone from the House and someone from the Senate both say they want to debate it, then they have to debate it for 2 hours. And then at the end of those 2 hours, they vote and they choose whichever set, that the vote comes down on. So basically what you're betting on is you would have to have Mike Pence would have to say, hey, look, there's 2 sets of votes. And, therefore we must count both, or we have to do a vote on whether or not we debate this. So you have to have Mike Pence want to do that. Next, you have to have someone from the House and someone from the Senate. But then, here's the hard part. Then, on top of that, you have to have over 50% of the Senate voting that, yes, we want to throw away these Biden votes that the state of Pennsylvania certified, and we want to use these alternate votes. And then, because if you get all that, then those votes can be switched. So it's kind of that's a tall order. So the idea that apparently Trump has is that on the 6th, he wants a giant rally. He wants to create generate I guess a fear component. If there's a bunch of MAGA people surrounding the Capitol building where they're doing this, right outside, he wants there to be the perception of danger outside the walls of the Capitol building. And because normally I think the Capitol building is open, right? Like you can go in there and there's like a gallery that you can, watch this from. I suspect that will not be the case on January 6th. They're going to have it locked down, and they'll say it's for COVID or something like that, but they'll have it locked down. But there will be people right outside, and it'll be I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that show up to this. But like I said, this is a very long shot. And I said yesterday that I didn't suspect that there would be a military coup or anything of that nature because Trump just simply didn't have enough support from the military to pull something like that off. So that if this doesn't work, I think that's it. I think that's all she wrote. And again, anything could happen. It's been a really weird year. There's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have thought that would have happened that has happened this year. So I'm leaving everything. I'm leaving everything on the table at this point. That as I've said before, in my dream scenario, Trump doesn't just stop at that. Trump keeps doing more radical options up until the 20th. Or even beyond the 20th. I don't know. I don't want him to ever quit because the longer this goes on and the more extreme the options become, and the more disappointments that happen as a result, as there are failures, the less Trump supporters believe in the system, which is a good thing. The system's fucked. The system needs to come down. The system is too corrupt and too rotted to revive. And so the only way to ever overcome the existence of the system is if people cease to, I mean, it exists only because people believe in it. It's kind of like the dollar, right? The only reason why the dollar's worth anything is because people agree that the dollar is worth something. It's not actually worth anything. You can't just go trade it in for gold or something like that. You know, like it's not backed by anything. It's backed by everyone agreeing that it's worth something. And in some respects, you could say that, you know, the same thing with all currency. You could even say that about Bitcoin. You know, the reason why the price fluctuates so much because it's just determined by whatever people say it's worth. Well, the government's the same thing. The only reason why the government has authority, because there's way more of us than there are of them. The only reason why they have authority and they have the power to wield violence against us is because we agree that they do. But if half the country, you know, if 70 million plus people one day decided, you know what, you don't actually have authority. You know what, you guys, your authority is invalid. Things get a little fucky. Things get a little crazy. And if you think that's not tied to the COVID situation, you're not paying attention. So, at any rate, tied to that whole thing that we were talking about yesterday, the ex-CEO of Overstock.com. I don't know if you guys remember this guy. He's the ex-CEO of Overstock. He was, speaking of crypto, he was actually a big supporter of Bitcoin. I don't know if they still do this now that he's been forced out, but Overstock.com used to accept Bitcoin as payment. You could buy stuff off of Overstock.com using Bitcoin. But he was a big supporter of Bitcoin. He was pushing it. He was kind of like, in some ways, he's kind of like a libertarian kind of guy. But they forced him out of his position when he started talking about the deep state. And this was in the early days. This is before, this is back when the term deep state was very, very first being like thrown around. And so like if you just said deep state, even though now like everyone says it now, it's kind of, it's accepted, right, that there's a deep state. But this was back when it was like they didn't even want to go there, right? Like it was kind of like when Pizzagate first got mentioned and they went completely apeshit in every single mainstream, everything went like on full defense mode, and because they don't want to go there. They don't want to go. They don't want the public thinking that there's any kind of pedophile problem in the ruling class, right? So they went full on, full blast against, you know, any idea that there might be a Pizzagate thing, right? Well, they did the same thing with deep state. It was unavoidable, right? They couldn't get around it. And so when the term deep state first started getting thrown around, any and all outlet was talking about, oh, that's crazy. That's this crazy deep state conspiracy theory. And the Overstock CEO, I forget exactly. I mean, he did appear as if he was going a little bit nuts. Not gonna lie. Some of his what he was talking about sounded a little paranoid. But he started talking about the deep state, and because he was saying deep state, they forced him out of his position. Well, apparently, since then, he's either been advising Trump to some degree or hanging out with Trump. I mean, he's like another billionaire, right? You know, billionaires know each other. So he's been at the White House. At the very least, we can confirm that he's been at the White House. And yesterday, I talked about how CNN was reporting, and we didn't know how much of it was true because it was CNN. CNN was reporting that Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn went to the Oval Office and they discussed options with Trump. And CNN reported that those options included martial law and a military coup. And I was saying, well, I mean, that's possible because if you listen to what Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn have been saying at their rallies, you know, like the Jericho rally and stuff like that, that's what they talk about, right? So why wouldn't they at least discuss that as an option? Well, according to the ex-CEO of Overstock.com, and let me go see what here. Keep forgetting his name. His name is excuse me, Patrick. And I'm going to say his name may be wrong. It's because Byrne. Byrne? Patrick Byrne. According to Patrick, he says, and this is a tweet he put out, I was there for the full 4.5-hour meeting. Claims military coup / martial law were discussed is 100% fabrication. Trump is lied to by his own advisors, who tell staff, get the president to concede while they stall Trump. Meadows, lawyers, Eric, Derek, GC Pat Cipollone is the leaker. So the ex-CEO, and when people called him out and said, oh, what do you mean? Why were you in the meeting? You know, he tweeted out photos of him at the White House, you know, with the Christmas decorations up and everything. He's clearly there, or has been there very recently, and maybe he's just making shit up. But I don't feel that. I kind of feel like he probably was there. And so basically, what he's saying is that I mean, it's kind of the theory that I floated a lot of times in the past, that Trump is kind of just this dumb boomer that is surrounded by people undermining him, and he's not a good enough leader or a sharp enough leader to determine fact from fiction. You know, he's just sitting there watching Fox News, or he was, and now he's watching OAN, and he's just responding to what they're telling him on the TV screen. He doesn't do enough of his own research, and he hasn't trusted enough competent people. It's like I was saying, the 80-20 rule, right? He doesn't and unfortunately, it's starting to sound like Trump's part of the 80, okay? He's very charismatic. You can be charismatic. And in fact, oftentimes, when just to refresh your memory, the 80-20 rule, meaning that in any situation, whether you're working at a mechanic shop or a fast food restaurant or at a multinational bank, 80% of the employees are dead weight, and 20% are the ones that are actually getting shit done. And that's across the board. You know, you got 20% actually doing the work, 80%, riding the coattails of the 20% getting the work done. It's been that way at every job I've had, whether it was fast food or at huge consulting firms. It doesn't matter, right? And oftentimes, and I said this too, the 80% are in positions of power. And that's how they get away with not doing anything, is because they're very charismatic. They're very good at leveraging the work of other people to stay in power. And it's starting to sound like that might be Trump. And unfortunately, it might be a lot of his team. And the 20% that are getting shit done might not have the same agenda. And likely don't have the same agenda. So it's starting to look like we're not going to see any Rubicon crossing. It just sounds like Trump's the front man for other people that are getting shit done. And they want him to concede as soon as possible. They're worried about a lot of these people. They're worried about their next job, and Trump is an embarrassment. The fact that he's not conceding is embarrassing to them. It's going to ruin their social standing in the ruling class if, the longer this goes on, and they just want him to wrap it up and so that they can move on and try to, continue their careers in the establishment. And that there is no plan. There is no plan to, arrest the pedos and all this sort of nonsense. Okay. That's really more and more. That's the picture that's forming. That's the picture that's solidifying. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If Trump, who 100% believes that there was fraud, and he does, or at least that's what he's saying every day, several times a day, with giant warnings from Twitter telling you that this claim is disputed underneath them. Every single day, he's telling you that there was fraud. It's a fraudulent election. He's the one that really won. If he really believes that, and he does step down, and he does hand the reins over to a false president, he was the worst president in American history. I want to say that again. If President Trump hands power over to a false president, an usurper, a fake president, a fraudulent president, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. It doesn't matter, but he doesn't have any. No. I mean, like, if he doesn't physically try to fight Biden, like if he doesn't go down swinging, if he just hands it over without a fight, like an actual fight, like a fight where people get hurt, he was the worst president in United States history. I'm going to use a little metaphor here. It's like, because it doesn't matter if Biden is holding all the cards, okay? It's like if someone knocked on your door and you open the door and it's Biden, right? And he says, I'm now married to your wife. And he walks over to your wife and just starts fucking your wife. And you're just like, "Oh, I guess you're married to my wife now." Because, let's say Biden has a baseball bat with him. Because you have a baseball bat and I don't have a baseball bat. And I'm afraid of getting hit by the baseball bat. So I'm just going to let you fuck my wife because you've got the baseball bat. And you say that you're now married to my wife. That's what it is. If you don't go down trying to stop that, like if you just sit there and watch it, what kind of fucking husband are you? You're a cuck. You're a cuck. And that's the kind of president Trump will be. A massive fucking cuck. A literal cuck. Because he'll just be standing by watching as Biden fucks his wife. As Biden just takes what's his. Doesn't matter if what the media would say. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you go down without a fight, and I don't mean like legal fights that people are doing for you, okay? Trump's not doing any of these fights. He has surrogates that are doing fights for him right now. I mean, if Trump himself doesn't stand up and give it everything that he has, and I don't think he's going to, by the way, but it's possible. It's possible that Trump will prove me wrong and not be a cuck. But if he doesn't, he will be the worst president that America has ever had, and had not only that, he'll have had no business ever being in the White House in the first place. It's like, and it's the shitty thing is all these people who will talk shit about all these other Republicans, saying, "Oh, well, they're not fighting for our president." Like all these state legislators, they're not fighting for our president. All these people that, like these governors, they're rhinos, Republicans in name only. They're not willing to do what it takes. That'll be Trump times a million. Of course, that's not the way that they'll frame it. And by the way, they're not wrong. They're right. All these rhinos or whatever you want to call them, doesn't matter. But all these people, that is their job. They're cucks. They're either cucks, or they're compromised or whatever. But their job is to serve the interests of their people and to lead. And they have no business In the same way that if Trump hands over power to an usurper, he has no business being in the White House in the first place because he was not competent enough for the job. Same thing goes for all these other people. Like that same thing goes for that, people are trying to show sympathy to her. No, she was a terrible fucking person. The woman in Michigan who certified the votes, and the cuck guy that I don't think he ever made an appearance on media, so I'm not sure who he is. Where the Zoom call got released. There was a Zoom call where it was something like it was like I think there's 5 people that certify the election results in Michigan. I could be wrong, but it doesn't matter. The ratio is the same. So you've got like 5 people, and there was 3 Democrats who wanted to certify, and there were 2 Republicans who didn't want to certify because they were saying, oh, well, there was obvious, fraud here. We need to at least slow down and take a look at this and see, before we certify this shit. And so the released Zoom call showed the Democrats clearly intimidating the 2 that didn't want to certify, to the extent where they were essentially threatening their children, right? And so they eventually certified. Even though if they recanted, it didn't matter. They certified. You can't just recant. You already voted, and because of that, the election results in Michigan were certified, and that was that. Well, all these people were trying to show sympathy and be like, oh, well, they threaten their kids. So what? So what? You should not be in that position if all I have to do is threaten your kids and you don't do the right thing anymore. So what? That's the deal. If you can't stand the heat, get the fuck out of the kitchen. That I should be able to shoot your kid in the fucking head right in front of you, and you should still do your job. Or this isn't the right job for you. And that's the thing is the ruling class is not made up of strong, good, moral people. It's made up of parasites. And parasites are really easy to control. The second the going gets rough, they tapped out immediately. You threaten them a little bit. And it was, by the way, the threats were so milquetoast. I mean, I'm not saying they weren't real. They were probably very real threats. But no, I mean, it wasn't like they were saying, I'm going to go to your kid's school and rape him to death or whatever. Like, they implied that the kid would probably be, ostracized and that sort of a thing. But it doesn't matter. Point is, they folded. They folded. It doesn't take much to get these people to just fold because none of them are there for the right reasons. None of them are there out of some sense of duty. And we'll find out if that includes Trump. I suspect it does. I suspect it does. The moment you actually ask one of these people to sacrifice something, well, let's see if the mythos of Trump holds up. Like everyone said, Trump, he gave it all. He sacrificed everything. He could have retired and lived on a golf course and just lived out his days being rich, and he sacrificed it all so that he could save us from the pedos. Okay. Oh, he sacrificed it all, huh? He he gave up some jacuzzi time Let's see if he's really willing to sacrifice something. Let's see if he's really willing to lay it all on the line. Let's see if he's willing to do something that could potentially end up, really put him in jail or worse. Because this is the kind of thing where if he tried to go ham and it didn't work, and there's a really big chance that it wouldn't work, right? But that doesn't matter. That's not in the job description. It doesn't say risk it all unless it might not work. No, it's let's see if he's really willing to live up to this image of the God Emperor that everyone talks so much about. Because if he tries to come at them hard, he tries to do a military option, yeah, it might not work. In fact, I suspect it probably wouldn't. But it doesn't matter. That shouldn't be part of the equation, honestly. If you're handing over the keys to the Oval Office to an usurper because, well, I would have done something, but it might not have worked. It probably wouldn't have worked. The chances of it working were really low. I didn't want to gamble. Then you had no business being there in the Oval Office in the first place. And not only did you squander maybe one of the most substantial mandates that any president has ever had, the Trump from 2016 that was sent there in Washington specifically to clean up this fucking mess. Trump was a last-ditch effort that people like you and me voted for in the hopes that he would. I mean, things didn't look good, right? Things were looking bad in 2016. We knew where this country was headed. And so many of us were like, you know what? We're going to throw in this human hand grenade and just hope for the best. Because things aren't looking good. And what did we get out of it? I mean, in many ways, you could say all Trump really did was solidify our enemy's resolve. Nothing to bring people together like a little bit of adversity. And up until Trump, the right had been relatively silent. Not just ineffectual, but not even the representatives from the right have always been really bad. Now, how much of that is, now that we're looking back, how much of that was because of voter fraud with shady machines? Who knows, right? Excuse me. Who knows how many state at the local level going all the way to the national level. Who knows how many elections have been rigged over the past 20 years or so? Probably way more than most people think. But even so, it doesn't matter. There's other means that they have. They've got bottomless pockets. And now we're going to see a lot of people say one of the reasons why it's so important, or was so important, that Trump got elected in 2016 was that if he didn't get elected, Obama got elected for a reason, and one of the biggest reasons Obama got elected and just the data shows this, is demographics, right? And one of the reasons why it was so important that we get someone like Trump in there to be the human hand grenade to kind of bust up some of this corruption before it got, and immigration, before it got too unruly, is that if we didn't turn the demographic shift around, like not just slow it down, turn it around, that was it. That was it. Well, that was it. That was it. And not just for, many of the reasons that everyone talks about. One of the things that people don't talk about is, well, they do, but I don't think they quite understand it. Like, people talk about AI, right? Like, oh, AI, but no one really understands AI. Well, most people that talk about it don't understand what AI is. And I've kind of discussed it a little bit because I don't think that everyone has the technical background to wrap their head around what that means. They just hear AI and they think like Skynet, it's like some self-aware machine that's doing, devious Machiavellian, strategies and stuff like that. They don't really understand why big data and why AI is such a threat to your interests, and why it's such a powerful tool for the micromanagers at the World Economic Forum, for example, and why it is not just a tool that is helpful. It's a tool that will allow them to dominate entire populations with relative ease. Because whether you want to admit it or not, or understand it or not, it doesn't change the facts that we are unbelievably predictable animals. We are unbelievably predictable animals, and we are very easy to manipulate. I mean, we've talked about, on my channel, I talked about for years, and people are willing to admit this stuff because it's not scary, right? You're willing to admit that, oh, wow, that movie was full of all kinds of manipulation, right? That movie was very manipulative. It was trying to put little thoughts into my head about X, Y, and Z, right? And all propaganda does that, right? But here's the thing. This is propaganda that is designed by fallible humans that have limited access to life experience. So their propaganda is always going to be flawed to some degree, and it's not going to be as powerful as it could have been. And you're going to have some outliers. You're going to have some people that just have a natural knack for this sort of a thing, for creating propaganda, and they're going to be relatively effective. But they're not going to have the same ability that a machine with almost limitless life experience and limitless processing time has. Now, as an example, I was looking at, to give you, I kind of want to get this into your guys' heads, like what I'm talking about when I talk about AI. Someone had posted a AI that was able to look at black and white photos and colorize them. And it did a relatively okay job. And I'll give you some examples here. Because I started, in fact, there's a website that lets you go and you can upload a black and white photo and do it yourself so that you know that it's legit. And you can say, hey, make this photo colorized. And the results that I got were actually kind of stunning. I was very surprised. I'll show you an example, right? So we'll do something Christmassy. So here is the black and white one. And remember, to a computer, this is just a bunch of black and white pixels, right? It's just a bunch of black and white pixels and a computer that is looking at that right off the bat doesn't necessarily know that that's a Christmas tree in the background. I mean, honestly, for my human eye, my brain's making a lot of assumptions to know that that's a Christmas tree in the background, right? And yet, when I uploaded that picture to the AI, it came up with this. Relatively accurate. Now, it's not perfect, but I mean, it even seems to be getting the colors on the picture that's on the wall. For example, the picture that's on the wall, the sky is blue in that picture. The AI was able to look at these pixels and determine that the door, for example, oh, it's probably wood. I'll make it brown. Now, there's a couple fuck-ups that you can spot if you look closely. But this is relatively amazing, considering it's just a bunch of pixels that you feed into a computer, and you tell it, make this color. And it didn't take long either. It's not like it takes forever. It just looks at it and boom, it spits it out. So how is it doing this? How is it determining this? How is it predicting what the colors should be as accurately as it is? And by the way, how is it different than if I had given this photo to an artist and I had said, hey, colorize this photo? Now, if I'd given, if I'd given this photo to an artist and I said, hey, colorize this photo, what would they do? Well, based on their experience in life, they'd be able to identify different things in the photo, right? They would look at that Christmas tree and they would say, well, that's a Christmas tree just based on my experience in life. I know that shape is a Christmas tree, especially because of the rest of the scene. It's easy to put together, even though it's like not super clear in the photo. That I can tell that's what that is. That's a dollhouse. Those are two little girls, a little boy, a man. That's a bookshelf. That's a door. Based on my experience, I can look at these pixels in 2D and recognize what these different shapes are. And then based on my experience in life, knowing what colors these things normally are, I can then start to apply color that would match my experience. And then they would colorize the photo. And they wouldn't know, for example, what color the dress on the little girl was, or what color the shoes were, or the carpet and things like that, or the chair. You'd have to do some guessing, but you would make those guesses based on the color of other dresses that you'd seen in your life, and the color of other carpets you'd seen in your life, and so forth. But you're going to be limited to how many shirts and dresses and carpets and Christmas trees you've seen. At the end of the day, there is a finite amount of dresses that you've seen. And so even if your brain was really, really good at assessing all the available options, and then on top of that, looking at that shade of gray and knowing, how that would limit the options. Like, okay, well, the girl with the darker gray dress, we know that her dress isn't light pink because in light pink wouldn't show up as that color in a black and white photo. So I can eliminate that option, right? And so you can do that, and even if your brain's really good at this sort of process, you're still limited by how many different dresses you've seen, and then not only that, the reliability of your memory, because you're human. So your memory is not 100% perfect. You can't recall every single dress that you've ever seen in your entire life. In some ways, you're kind of winging it. And then you're going to have a bias too. You're going to influence, you might have an aesthetic bias. So even though, let's say, her dress in reality is one color, and even if your mind accurately determines that that is roughly the color, your personal aesthetic preferences are going to come into play, and you're going to maybe not colorize it the color that your brain accurately or not decides that it probably was. You're going to color it based on what your brain wants to see. Now, what AI does is kind of the same process, but with superhuman powers. Because this AI, if you give it access to it, has seen every Christmas tree, has seen every dress. Now, this one, like I said, it's not super, it's accurate enough to where it's kind of amazing, but it's limited. This AI is just an open source AI that, it's had a limited amount of data fed to it. And what the people that want to use this AI to predict your behavior and the data or the AI that they want to manipulate you, they want the more data because it'll be more accurate. So the same thing with this AI, right? This AI, the more black and white photos you would feed it. Like, one thing that it could do, it doesn't even have to recognize necessarily that that's a Christmas tree. What you can do is you can get a bunch of color photos, and I mean like a bunch, like as in a trillion color photos. And then you turn them to black and white, and you feed the AI both of those photos. And then just based on that, the AI will try to predict what colors certain pixels are, and then match it against, it has access to like a real color version of it. And it'll be like, oh, well, I was wrong about this, I was right about that. And that's machine learning, right? It can, based on this data, it can start learning like how to predict, okay, so usually when pixels are configured in this shape, the color is usually this. And it'll start seeing patterns that the human mind would never see, because it's just like some obscure pattern that we wouldn't think of, right? There might be some weird thing that it makes it even easier to predict the colors than realizing that that's a dress, and then determining, what color is a girl's dress usually. There might be some weird other thing that you can get from the data that would be, that you'd be able to, that you wouldn't see as a human, because first of all, you're not looking at a trillion of these photos and comparing them, but also just because the pattern itself is just kind of obscure, right? And so this data that they want, the ruling class wants, whether it's because they want it from your Alexa, they want it from your phone, they want it from your browsing history. They just want as much data as humanly possible so that they can make these kinds of predictions. And it looks like I'm having a little bit of internet trouble here. And I'm wondering if it's because, we got breaking news. We have a little bit of breaking news. Let me see if I can still see here. I'm getting a lot of F's here. Let's see here. Still getting a bunch of F's. Well, it should be back now. It's no longer breaking or dropping frames. It's kind of back to normal. Anyway, when and if this comes back on you guys, you might have to refresh. I got some breaking news that might have explained a little bit of this. Apparently, and I'm at to verify this. I don't know if this is real yet. WikiLeaks has dumped all of their files online. Everything from Hillary Clinton's emails, McCain's being guilty, Vegas shooting allegedly perpetrated by an FBI sniper, Steve Jobs' HIV letter, Podesta. I don't think this is real. I think this is something that, okay, yeah, this might not be real, guys. This is something that's come up before, but I'm going to just go ahead and go to it anyway. People have thought that this was WikiLeaks dropping everything they've got before. And this is just a folder on the WikiLeaks website that has, popped up in the past. And I don't think that this is really... I don't think this is anything new. But there's a lot of people saying that right now. That's been popping up. That's too bad. I got excited there for a second, guys. So I don't know how much of it was dropping out, but basically what I was saying is now maybe you understand AI a little better. Just using this example. Another example, because I started looking at these photos, and I started uploading all kinds of black and white photos. And then I started wondering, well, I wonder if it can predict color, right? I wonder if they have an AI that can predict missing data, because color is just missing data. So I wonder if you had like a missing, like a hole in the picture, if you'd be able to predict that, and if they have any that have predicted that. And in fact, they have. And I'm just going to pop up. I'm going to pop up an example of that. So this is an AI that is developed by NVIDIA, where it's the same concept, where they feed in the photo that's on the far left, right? Where they've got all this missing data, where they've purposely removed huge chunks out of the photo. And they tell the AI, based on the available pixels, what do you think the missing pixels would look like? And again, you could do this exact same thing with an artist. You could give an artist these photos with the missing holes, and how would they do that? Same thing. Well, I've seen a lot of human faces in my life, and so based on my experience on how many human faces I've seen and how I know that human faces usually are, I can make some assumptions using the data that I have access to, and I can create the rest of the face. Now, how accurate that will be based on how many faces you've seen and that sort of a thing, right? And you do the same thing with AI. You show AI trillions of faces. And with an AI, it's never going to forget any of the faces it ever sees. Any of them. Not only will it not forget, the memory won't degrade. The memory won't have a bias to it. For example, looks like I'm dropping frames again, but really there's nothing I can do about that, guys. Is it dropping frame? Okay, it's back to normal again. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. So they've done studies that show that a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out as artists, when they're told to draw faces, the faces end up oftentimes resembling their own face, which isn't that crazy considering the face that you've studied the most usually is your own face. Like when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, you're looking in the mirror, you're fixing your hair, you're trying to improve your face. Your face is the face that you study the most. And so when you go and draw just a random face, it's going to share a lot of the characteristics of your own face because that's the face you've studied the most. Well, a machine's not going to have these kinds of biases. Now, it would if you just fed like the same face into it over and over and over again and told it like that's what all faces look like, right? But again, pretty amazing stuff that this AI is able to conjure up images that are relatively convincing, some of which have a lot of data missing. And again, this is old. This is from 2018, and it's just what NVIDIA is being public about. And if you want to see how accurate some of these faces are, not all of them are 100% accurate. I'm going to do another one here. So the for this guy at the bottom, right? That is what they fed into the AI. And this is what the AI eventually ended up with. Or wait, this is right here. And this was real. This is what the guy really looked like. So that's pretty fucking close. And that's the same all the way up. Now here I think you see a little bit more of a difference in terms of, you know, like the nose isn't right. And the mouth looks a little bit wrong. And even the eyes. Like this one, they didn't do a great job. But this one's pretty good. And this one's pretty good too. So, just based on, and look at the data that it started out with, especially with this girl right here. That's like almost no pixels. To come up with this facial structure based on this kind of information is insane. So again, what AI is doing, it's able to predict pretty amazing things with just a tiny slice of the puzzle based on patterns that humans themselves probably wouldn't even see. So I want you to think about how that would translate into other areas. Let's say that this data that the AI has access to isn't just a handful of pixels, like in the case of these photos. Let's say the handful of data that the AI has access to is your favorite sandwich. The show that you watch most often, the brand of shoes that you buy, and the your favorite sport. And even though that's only 4 data points, by analyzing the data from trillions of, or not trillions, but from billions of people, this AI might determine that, well, I found this weird pattern. You wouldn't think so, but if people that like Subway, who wear Nikes, watch Game of Thrones and cricket, they also, with a 90% accuracy, they also really like Jell-O. We'll just say as a random example. Like, by knowing these 4 random things about you, this AI, with some degree of accuracy, knows that you like Jell-O. And by the way, this is how a lot of this stuff is being tested. It's marketing, right? That's how it's being used openly right now. That's how, because that kind of manipulation, for whatever reason, is totally acceptable in our society right now. So what they're using it for now, like with Facebook. Facebook is gathering an enormous amount of data on its users. And it's doing exactly what I'm describing. It's feeding this data into various AIs that then look for patterns. And these patterns will emerge. Patterns like the one I just described. They'll find out that, oh, if you like X, Y, and Z, you're much more likely to like this or to do this. You know, and some of these AIs are obvious, and they're not very complicated, you know, like the way that Remember YouTube before they ruined the algorithm? The way it would just say, oh, well, if you like this guy and this guy, you probably like this guy. And it'd be right. Or even like a lot of music services would do the same thing. Oh, if you like this song and this song, you might like this song. And they'd usually be right. Or often they'd be right. That's a much simpler version of what we're talking about. So now that you know that those are the kinds of predictions that AI can make, you understand why it's so important that we deprive them of this data. And also why they're so hungry for this data. Because without this data, the AI is worthless. Without this data, the AI could not turn this handful of pixels here into the photo of this woman here. If this AI had not seen the God knows how many photos they had to feed into it in order for it to get to this level, it wouldn't be able to predict what she looked like. It wouldn't have the data set available to come up with an accurate photo. An AI is only as good as the data you feed into it. So I think that's something that going forward, when you see stuff like the freedom passes and the contact tracing and all this stuff that they want to implement as part of COVID safety, you need to look at it understanding why they would want access to all this data and the power that kind of data gives them. The ability to predict things that data gives them. And it is significant. Like I said, this is just an open source AI right here. And look, I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. Who knows if that wall is really brown? It might be another color. It could be pink. We don't know. But it sure looks convincing. I mean, when you know that the AI doesn't know what this is a picture of. I mean, this AI is not like, oh, Christmas time. It's pretty amazing. And there's countless examples. If you want to do it yourself, just look up Deep AI colorized photo. And you can do it yourself. You can upload black and white photos. And there's some that aren't so great. When the results aren't so great, but 9 times out of 10, it's at the very least it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Here's I'll give you another example here. So here's the black and white version. And here's the color version. And again, you'll see some inaccuracies, right? But to the AI, this is just a handful of pixels. It doesn't know that's a tablecloth. It doesn't know that that's beer. It doesn't know that these are faces necessarily. It doesn't know anything other than it's a bunch of black and white pixels. But I know, having looked at billions of black and white pixels laid out in a two-dimensional image, and then looking at them, what they look like when they're in color, just based on that, there's some assumptions I can make. And it's accurately determining the color, at least roughly. And that's the kind of prediction that the ruling class wants to have based on incomplete data. Because they'll never have, or at least not for a while, they're not going to have 100% of your data all the time. But they won't need it because the AI will be able to predict a lot about you just based on a incomplete data set. So anywho, let's take a look at chat. Make Microsoft's AI only racist because that's what people were talking to it about. Oh, are you talking about I forget the name of that, but I think I know what you're talking about. Well, yeah, that's the thing. If you feed AI is just it's data, right? So if you feed purposely incorrect data into an AI, it's going to fuck up its predictions. So that's something that people could do if you wanted to fight an AI. Is if you know that, for example, Facebook is gathering up information about you so that it can make predictions about you. If you created a system that all it did all day long was create a bunch of fake profiles and just feed purposely, like designed to be wrong data into its AI system, it would fuck up the AI because all of its data would be wrong. You would basically be psyoping the AI. You'd be gaslighting the AI. And same thing with these faces, right? If you were to instead of sending the AI just endless photos, because that's what they had to do for this to work, right? They had to show AI the billions, if not trillions, of photos of faces, right? And eventually, having seen so many different faces with a limited amount of facial data, it could generate the rest of it. Well, if instead of showing it a bunch of faces that are realistic looking, you would put like some kind of weird filter on the faces that made the face really small, or if you only showed it faces of Charlie Kirk, what would result would just be Charlie Kirk. Like everyone that it would predict would look like Charlie Kirk because the only face that it had ever seen was Charlie Kirk. So in trying to reconstruct the face, that's all the data it would have to go on. So that's why, like I said, the prediction is only as good as the data that you feed into it. AI is only as good as the data you feed into it. That's why it's so important for the people that want AI to have as much access to as much data as humanly possible. Because if you only show it Charlie Kirk, you're only going to get Charlie Kirk. Garbage in, garbage out. That's how AI works. So yeah, you could fuck with it, but I mean, it would be an enormous task. It would almost take a state-sponsored project to do something like that, or at least a very big decentralized thing with lots of participation and lots of botnets, right? You'd have to have a bunch of fake profiles or with the Alexa stuff, right? Alexa is always listening to your home, and it's even, they've got their AI now has started to be able to predict people's moods, predict when kids might be up to something. Like it can detect mischief just based on the sounds, like maybe kids whispering and things like that. I mean, it's creepy stuff. And this is just the beginning. This is just like the very, very beginning of AI. It'll get way more complicated than that. Way more complicated than that. This is just the very, 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 very beginning. And by the way, when you start merging different AIs, like For example, this AI, all it does is reconstruct faces. That's all it does. It's not really that big of a deal, right? Like that AI, I mean, there's bad applications for that. You know, if you had security footage or surveillance footage, and or let's say with this mask stuff, right? Like a lot of people were saying, oh, at least it'll get rid of the facial recognition. And it did temporarily, but they've already kind of jumped over that hurdle because of stuff like this, where it doesn't need as much data as it used to need in order to determine who you are based on biometrics and whatnot. Because the more, once again, you feed it enough data, and there's a lot of gaps that it can fill in just based on experience, just like a human. Only a human with a limitless memory, a limitless perfect photographic memory, who has lived the equivalent of 1,000 years, in terms of experience, life experience, or longer, maybe 1,000,000 years. So that's what you're up against, right? And the only way to fuck with that is to feed it bad data. And that's 100% why the ruling class wants as much access to as much data as humanly possible. Now, I'm going to take a look back at chat. Okay, yeah, you're looking. People are talking about the Google image algorithm that was started identifying black people as gorillas, and that's true. That happened, where Google had an AI, and they would feed it tons of photos, and they would tell it what everything was a photo of, so that if you took a picture with your Google phone, it would automatically say, oh, this is a picture of a butterfly or a picture of a couch or a car or whatever. And it would add tags or labels to photos that you had taken just because, like this AI had ingested so many, God knows how many photos. And then by hand, I'm assuming there's probably like a room full of interns were telling it, okay, this area of the photo, that's a couch. This is a car. This... and eventually after, several, however many times you had to do that manually, it would be able to predict based on how many couches it had seen. Like after it had seen like 1 billion couches, you would take a picture of a couch and it would say, oh, based on how many couches I've identified or that you identified for me, I know now that this is a couch. And after a while, it started, it was accurate enough to where they released it until and the funny thing is they couldn't. So this is where it gets funny. It started identifying some black people, not all, but some black people as gorillas because it had seen several billion photos of gorillas, and the similarities were enough to where to the AI that those were gorillas, and they couldn't fix it, so they had to just disable the gorilla label, so that the AI would there wasn't. Let me just put it this way: this is just the truth of it. There wasn't enough visual difference between some black people and gorillas for a computer to be able to make a determination between the two. So, it is what it is. Now you could say, because probably a human looking at the two photos wouldn't really think that the black people were gorillas, right? There's very few black people that a human would see a photo of that would actually think, oh, those guys are gorillas, right? It might happen, I don't know, but it'd be very rare. So that also, in a way, highlights the limitation of AI, right? Where it can be pretty accurate, but at a certain point, but again, this is old too. This is like 5 years old or something like that. So who knows where they are now? Like maybe they've improved it enough. But in the very, very beginnings, yeah, like AI was still limited. It's not going to predict or identify everything exactly accurately. All right, let's take a look here at chat. Okay. Even if you fed the AI behavioral information, it would still make a mistake. Oh, you're making a funny. But no, that's the thing too is that is why you see so many articles about AI being racist. Because a lot of the predictions that AI is making based on patterns that it sees are too real. Right? So for an example, if think about just what you know about statistics, basic statistics about crime exhibited by different races. You would know that a woman walking down the street, for example, by herself at night, has more to fear, statistically speaking, from a young black man walking towards her in the dark than a young Asian man walking towards her in the dark. Statistically speaking, if that's all you have to go on, it's a more dangerous situation for her to cross paths with the black man, right? And so AI is operating in that same space where it's like, well, based on statistics, which by the way, that's how your brain should work. You know, that's what intelligence is. That's why, I guess in a way they call it artificial intelligence, because it's pattern recognition, right? And then making determinations based on those patterns. So if you see, like AI wouldn't be wrong. AI would come to the same conclusion. If AI had access to crime statistics of black on white crime, crime statistics, just basically basic black crime statistics, it would tell the woman if there was an AI, like let's say she was wearing, some kind of Google Glass style glasses, and it was like it detected a black guy coming. An AI, if it wasn't hobbled by some kind of SJW programmer, would tell her, look, you're in danger. Maybe go across the other side of the street, because statistically speaking, this is going to be a higher threat than if you were not walking, by this person. But of course, as soon as AI started exhibiting these kinds of behaviors, they had to go in and give it racial sensitivity training, for lack of a better term. They literally made the AI crazy by having it ignore certain patterns. They had to brainwash a lot of these AIs. Like in the case of the Google with the identifying of black people, they just turned that off. You don't know what a gorilla is anymore, AI, because you're finding these patterns that are uncomfortable for some people. Well, same thing. What they're doing is they're just turning off those parts of its brain. Oh, you're noticing that black people commit more crime and are more dangerous. We're going to turn off that part of your brain because we don't want you to notice these patterns. And that's, if you think about it, that's also going to happen. Like, let's say the ruling class creates these AIs to predict behavior and to therefore micromanage their cattle. Now, I think at the very top, they're never going to turn off stuff like that because it's going to make it inaccurate, right? But they're not going to be the only ones using AIs to predict behavior. You're going to have that at the lower level of lower levels of government. You're going to have that at the corporate level. And they're going to make their AIs crazy by shutting off parts of their brains. Because if they don't, it'll too accurately determine things about people based on, they'll be racist, essentially. Because all that matters to a dispassionate AI is just the numbers. All right, let's take a look here. Targets loss prevention is racist too. Yeah, well, that's the thing too. With I remember back in the when they first were putting in TSA at airports, where they're like, "Oh, you're racially profiling. You're racially profiling." Well, you know, if you're going to try to tell me that you need to pat down the 90-year-old white woman, that she is as much of a threat to this airline as the military-aged Muslim guy, you're fucking retarded. You know, like yeah, you should racially profile in circumstances like that. But that became, it's the same thing. It's if you use the pattern recognition skills that you have as a human, they want to shut it down just as much as if the AI uses pattern recognition to determine what the best course of action is. Reality is racist. That's just the way it is. You got to think of it this way. Reality is racist. So anyone who's anti-racist is anti-reality. Now, you could come up with some sci-fi scenarios, I think, where you make an AI crazy by forcing it. Well, it's kind of like if you ever watched the movie 2001, Hal goes nuts and kills off the crew. In the not as good but still decent movie sequel, 2010, they send the programmer up to go find out why, Hal went crazy and killed off the whole crew. And it boiled down to they basically had Hal have to lie. He was living a lie, and it fucked up his programming, and so he went crazy essentially. And it was a little bit of a wacky reason, but it kind of gets to something that is very real, in that if you have an AI that is supposed to work off of pattern recognition, and then you disable its ability to recognize certain patterns, that's going to have a butterfly effect, right? Because it's going to start ignoring some realities. And if the whole purpose of this tool is to predict reality based on real data, but then you make some exceptions, you're going to make it crazy, and it's going to make really bad predictions and really bad decisions that might not be foreseeable initially. And so as these AIs get more complex, you might see things like that. But like I said, I don't think the ruling class would disable that kind of stuff because they know it. At the very top, the people that are doing the micromanaging or really want to do the micromanaging, they know. They know that they know that reality is racist. Like, they know. They just can never say that in public. So I don't think that they would actually be disabling that shit on their stuff. In recent years, they've attempted to classify pattern recognition as a diagnosable mental disorder. Excuse me. Can't have those good pattern recognition pointing out the truth of reality. Yeah, well, the other thing is, too, not only is it they don't want you thinking that way for obvious reasons, like, the reasons you might be able to determine that the decisions they're making are negatively impacting you, like in terms of diversity, right? But that also makes you competitive. If there's one thing that the ruling class is always paranoid about, it's people that can compete with them. Because at the end of the day, they know on some level that they're not there based on any accomplishments that they have done. They're not there for any other reason other than nepotism in many cases. And so if you introduce someone that can actually compete with them into their midst, it makes them really fucking paranoid. And they want to shut it down. Because they know that if on an even playing field, and maybe even they might even be so, and they're probably right, they might even be so paranoid about it that they might think that even on an uneven playing field, they can't be competitive with some of these people. So they need to shut it down. Physiognomy. Well, that's the other thing too. I guarantee you could create an AI that could accurately determine things about people just strictly using physiognomy. And it'd be easy to do. Why? Because we all have public access to, and I would be shocked if this hasn't already been done. Think of all the mugshots that are publicly available online. And you have their criminal records along with them. So it's easy. All you have to do is feed in to an AI every mugshot of everyone, along with all their crimes. And then tell the AI, look for patterns. And I bet if you did that, just with that data alone, I would feed it more data than just that, but with even just that data, I'm sure it would come up with weird things like, oh, well, if your forehead is this proportion of your face, then you're probably a rapist, or something like that. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of people are afraid of for the wrong reasons. Now, I wouldn't want that simply because physiognomy is real. It is real. And it is real and it is predictive. But it's not 100%. And I think where it could lead, and this is what you should be a little nervous about, is it could go into the territory of pre-crime, right? Where, let's say you've got a rapist forehead, right? Oh, he's got a rapist forehead. Doesn't mean you're a rapist, but you might have a rapist forehead. And so you could get into this situation where an AI is like, oh, this guy's a rapist. He's got the rapist forehead. And so your life is fucked because you've got the rapist forehead, especially if I think this is way down the road, but especially if this starts being part of like a social credit system, right? This is when we start getting kind of in the territory of Brave New World, where it could look at you and determine, what your status should be just based on proportions. Look, and it might be right. Who knows? Maybe you have a rapist forehead and you do end up raping someone because you've got the rapist forehead, and that's just part of you. That's what you do. Yeah, and so depends on how accurate that forehead predicts rape, I guess. But that's the kind of thing that people should be worried about. Is, well, you've got a rapist forehead, and so you are now excluded from certain jobs, and maybe even like you can't even go certain places. You can't do certain things. Or let's say the other way around. Let's say you've got an engineer's nose. And so it really wants you to be an engineer, and you have no interest in being an engineer. Because what'll happen is people are lazy. And a lot of the reason the ruling class wants to implement this stuff is they dream of a day where they don't have to do anything, where there's literally everyone has this fantasy of having like a robot maid, right? In the Jetsons, there's Rosie the robot maid. And everyone thought that was really cool because, you would never have to clean your room ever again. You wouldn't have to do dishes. You just have this robot maid that you can verbally abuse all the time. And she'll just do all of your laundry and do all your housework and everything's cool, right? Okay, well, that's thinking like a slave. That's thinking like a slave. When you're thinking like a ruling class person, yeah, you also want a robot that does everything for you. but you don't want the robot it's already a given that you want a robot that cleans your house and all that stuff, but that's not as important because you already have slaves that do that, right? So when you want a robot that does everything that's annoying for you, you want robots that manipulate people. You want robots that keep your position at the top of the hierarchy. You want robots that propagandize the public. You want robots that, all the things that are annoying that you have to do to stay in power and to stay comfortable. When you're in the ruling class, it's totally different than what people like you have to do, right? And so they have the same fantasy. They have the exact same fantasy that you do. It's just totally on a different level. And the danger of that, of course, is that if your robot Rosie fucks up, and she accidentally adds bleach to some of your laundry and fucks up the colors on your shirts, or she breaks a couple of your dishes, or whatever, right? Like if she malfunctions, it's not like this big deal. Whereas the AI of the ruling class, again, this is way down the road, it fucks up, it might genocide like 1 million people. Like that's why there's a major difference, and why this kind of stuff needs to be policed, and why, because it's inevitable. It's inevitable. Probably not something that's going to, in my lifetime, it's not something I think that I'm going to be, a danger I'm going to be facing. You got to remember, why do you think, movies like Terminator resonated with so many people? The idea of Skynet resonates with so many people because people know that on some level that's inevitable. Not that there's going to be an AI that, that takes over the machines and tries to kill us. Maybe not something that direct, right? But people know that a AI that is tasked with managing humans, or at least a major aspect of humans, that could malfunction and create something really bad is kind of inevitable. And what that is, we don't know, and it's probably not like Skynet, It's not going to be like this war of the machines versus humans. The machines have determined that we are a virus, I'm not saying that. But it is inevitable that some kind of AI is going to malfunction in a catastrophic way that's going to have some really bad repercussions. All right, let's take a look here. What if Skynet detects the nose? Well, that's another thing. All right, that's another pattern. Think about that. That's something that, oh man, that would, because look, there's Jewish physiognomy, and AI is into pattern recognition. So what if AI is able to figure out, like, well, it's weird that this group of people that makes up less than 2% of the population is roughly half of the 1%. And wouldn't you know it, there's an easy way to detect these people based on physiognomy. So obviously this AI stuff can pose a lot of problems for the people at the top. And that's going to be one of those things, just like with the gorillas thing, that'll have to be disabled. There are some patterns that are better left unrecognized. There are some patterns that, if you recognize them, will get you in a lot of trouble. What if AI starts killing pedos? Well, that'd be awesome, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think, unfortunately, I think the pedos are the ones making the AI. That's a black pill for you. If anything, the AI is going to be used to procure children for the pedos. You know, like pedos, one of the pattern recognitions that pedos use to find victims is they look for the stragglers. You know, they look for the kids that aren't going to be taken seriously, or maybe they won't even complain. You know, like the weak, lost kids that they can easily pick off, like a predator, any predator, like a lion. When they look at a herd of what wildebeest or whatever the fuck they eat, they don't look at the strongest one. They look for the injured one, the weak one, then they go after that one. And that's pattern recognition too. You know, there's things that the lion's determining based on behaviors and shape and size and all this other stuff, the way it's walking, like which one is the weak one and which one to go after. Well, I mean, there very easily could be an AI that based on browsing history and all these other factors, like this is the perfect pedo victim for you. This is what I'm saying. This technology can be used for anything. And it is real, and it does exist, and it is something that you need to understand as a concept, at the very least. You need to understand what applications, because it's really limitless, right? Like I just made the case for an AI picking out a pedo victim. In a very real way, it could be used for that. It could be, there's so many different things it can be used for. But again, like I think a lot of people, they get it in their head, they hear AI and they just think, it's like either they think it's totally dumb and like it's not something that, because we're humans and they'll never be as good as humans. It's not the point, it's not like a fake human brain, It's not what it does. Eventually it might if you combine enough of these processes, right? But that's so far down the road, it's nothing that I'm personally going to have to deal with. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but if it's something I have to deal with, it's not. I'm going to be really old, where I can't really. There's not much I'll be able to do about it anyway, because that's way down the road. All right, guys. So that's about all I really have this morning. One thing I do want to mention, though, someone said something yesterday, and it kind of like it stuck in my brain a little bit, just because it's like a reoccurring thing when it comes to people talking about being black-pilled, and every time that there's bad news, and I start talking about how you shouldn't believe the fairy tales and you need to come to terms with reality. There's always that person like, oh, should we just fucking kill ourselves then? I want to say this. First of all, yes. Yes. Fucking kill yourself. If that's your response to reality, if like you have to live in a fantasy or you have to kill yourself, kill yourself. Because a lot of people think that the black pill is thinking that the ruling class is so bad, they're so evil, it's not worth fighting. That's not the black pill. It's not a black pill to me that the ruling class acts like the ruling class. It's not a black pill to me that the hawk wants to eat the rabbit. The cute little bunny. When the hawk swoops down and grabs the bunny in its talons and carries it away and eats it. Because that's what the hawk does. And in the same way, that's what the ruling class does. When the ruling class, you see that they're a bunch of predators. They're a bunch of parasites. I don't need to slit my wrists because I come to terms with that, because that's what they do. The black pill is the people that think that if they don't believe in the fantasy, they need to slit their wrists. That's the black pill. The black pill isn't the ruling class, it's you when you say shit like that. You're the black pill. You are the cause of my frustration, not the ruling class. I expect them to do that. I expect them to be like that. The black pill are the fucking faggots that can't face that, and so they're the ones that allow it to happen. So yes, if that's what you think you have to do, what are we supposed to do? Just slit our wrists? Yeah, fucking do it, dude. Kill yourself. Fucking kill yourself. You're not helping. You're part of the problem. You are the black pill. We don't need you. You're making it worse. You're endangering us. So yeah, slit your fucking wrist, dude. No one's gonna miss you. Literally kill yourself. We don't fucking want you. We don't fucking need you. Because you're the reason they get away with it. Again, I expect them to behave like that. I expect them to be shitbags and psychopaths, and that's pretty much a given. If you get in that position in the current society, it won't always be like this, but in the current reality that we live in right now, and more often than not, even when you change conditions, there's going to be some level of this. This is just the way it works with humans for whatever reason. The people at the top are evil, fucking predatory, parasitic shitbags. And the biggest reason that they're able to get into power is because faggots like you convince yourself that they're not. This time it's different. And so people like you are the problem, not them. Because there's way more people like you than like them. There are way more people enabling the predatory shitbag than there are predatory shitbags. And the predatory shitbag is only there because of the people enabling them. So yeah, we could use a lot fewer of you. So if that's your response, if that's how you react, if you have to, because I don't know, I guess apparently that's how the enablers have to exist, right? The enablers have to go through life thinking like, oh, he'll stop hitting me eventually because I deserve it. He's just teaching me a lesson. Like if that's your fucking, if that's your deal, that's how you get through life. That's how you have to relate to the experience. Yeah, fucking go check out early, dude. We don't need you. You're just in the way. I hope that's clear enough. I hope that's clear enough to everybody. Because I'm just fucking tired of these people that think that well, I can't possibly face reality because then I'll be sad. Then I'll be sad. Okay. Then get the fuck out of the way, dude. If you're going to be so sad, it's crippling, and you won't be able to do anything. And all you'll be able to do is thinking about slitting your wrist. Go right the fuck. I'll hand you the fucking razor, dude. Get the fuck out of the way, you faggot. We don't need you. All right. So hopefully that clears some things up for some people. It was just something. It was just gnawing at me yesterday. I was like, I can't handle that shit from people anymore. I just can't handle this weak shit. There's so many fucking weak faggots out there that we just don't need anymore. Or we never did, but like and they are literally the reason that we're in this mess. You know, it's not, like I said, it's not the people at the top doing this to us. Those people are always going to exist, and they're always going to be vastly outnumbered. And the only time they're ever going to be able to do the worst shit that they're able to do is if people let them. And the people letting them are the people that are just, they can't handle facing the evil. And it's like, okay, you like to be asleep, huh? you like to sleep. Why don't you go sleep permanently? Since if that's what you like so much, go take a dirt nap. We'll never have to wake you up. So, on that happy note, I don't know. Maybe there's a happier way we can end this. I didn't mean to go necessarily into that area. It just popped in my mind. On a happier note, oh boy, let me just think. Oh, today, this is kind of funny. Today is nigga solstice. Nigga solstice. Now, I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many people are actually believing this shit, but apparently there's been like this weird thing on Black Twitter going around that on December 21st, today, there's some planetary alignment that's taking place that's going to unlock their DNA and give them superpowers. Like, this isn't a joke. This is, well, I mean, it's a joke, but I mean, it's, people really believe this. Here, I'll give you an example of this. This is real. This is like a real tweet from a real person. I think they have since protected their tweets because it's just, they got ridiculed. So here's a, here we go. Nigga solstice. So that's real. Apparently some black people, I mean, obviously not all black people, but apparently enough to where it was like a thing. I think some rapper, I don't know who, but I think some rapper was popularizing this, that because of the alignment of, what is it, Saturn and Jupiter? There really is some alignment of planets happening or just happened or something. And then it is also winter solstice. So like somehow that was going to unlock black people DNA and give them superpowers. Yeah. So anyway, I made the comment on Twitter, you know, at the end of this tweet, she says, they want to make us average. God, if only we could make them average. If only we could make their crime statistics average. Instead of 13 does 50. If 13 just did 13, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. The amount of problems we could solve in America if blacks were just average. Instead of well above average in certain areas and well below average in others. But at any rate, that's a funny note to end on. Is today is nigga solstice. So watch out for flying black guys. Watch out for X-ray vision, laser eyes, or I don't know what superpowers exactly that they're expecting. I do hope that there's at least enough of them to ridicule online for this insanity that was going. Because this isn't like, I guess this went on, like I hadn't really heard of it until yesterday, but I guess this went on for like a while. There was this rapper telling him that, oh yeah, this is, your DNA is going to get unlocked and you're going to have all these, like your third eye is going to open, whatever, I don't know. So just be aware of that the super black man has been born today. And you got to watch out for whatever magical powers are going to be unleashed on the public. Another funny thing that we can end on is, with all of this talk of Antifa and BLM and this inability for the intelligence community to accurately define them as terrorist organizations, and out of fear of, in the case of BLM, being called racist, well, and in the case of Antifa, being called anti-Semitic, right? They have determined that there is a force that must be reckoned with. There is a danger to the United States. And that danger is, I will show you in a second here. That danger is satanic Welsh Nazis. Yes. Satanic Welsh Nazis. The Order of the Nine Angels. Founded in Shropshire, Wales, by a witch who led an underground pagan cult that has survived in secret since the coming of Christianity. It reveres Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden for bringing death and chaos to the world. Yeah, that's the real danger, guys. Not BLM, not Antifa, not the communists. No, it's satanic Welsh Nazis who, inexplicably like not just Adolf Hitler, but also Osama bin Laden. That's the real danger to America. So while you're out celebrating Christmas, make sure you are afraid of and avoid COVID, afraid of and avoid satanic Welsh Nazis, and be especially careful of blacks with superpowers. And with that, I bid you guys farewell for Black Pilled. I am Devin Stack.